This is on assignment.
Hello again. We are back with you here at On Assignment. I am Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Imran Siddiqui. We start our show this week in the nation of Georgia, where our lab is getting Russia's attention, but not the good kind.
Some positive financial news for the Eurozone, but the crisis isn't over quite yet.
And it's back. The International Olympic Committee restores wrestling to the Games. We'll talk with our favorite sports blogger about this.
And a unique way to keep young people out of trouble.
We're going on assignment with the Voice of America. Relations between Russia and Georgia have long been strained, but the situation appeared to be improving this year when Russia lifted a 7-year-old ban on Georgian wine and reopened its borders to Georgian mineral water.
Then that progress hit a stumbling block. Russia blamed an epidemic spreading into the south of the country on a U.S.-funded laboratory in Georgia and said it would block imports of Georgian fruits and vegetables. But as our Moscow correspondent Jim Brook told me, politics, not science, may be behind the new trade fight. Take a look. Jim, what are Russia's concerns about this lab in Georgia?
Alex, they're really invented concerns. The head of consumer protection of Russia has said this lab infected southern Russia with African swine flu. Now, he's repeated this accusation several times over the last 10 weeks. It seems to be a way to put the Georgians on guard, on the defensive, and a way the Russians are using to block the imports of Georgian fruits and vegetables, which are very important for the Georgian economy.
The Georgians showed VOA around their new laboratory complex, the Richard G. Lugar Center for Public Health Research. Owned by Georgia's National Center for Disease Control, the lab tracks polio, measles, and other infectious diseases. Director Amiran Gamkrelidze rejects the accusations coming from Moscow.
We have no secrets here, nothing is here. We are not doing nothing connected with biological weapons.
And this allegation of biological weapons production at this U.S.-funded lab seems to be a bit ironic. So what do you make of that?
The Russians use these sort of non-traditional ways of blocking trade with their neighbors as an economic lever against their neighbors. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen the same head of consumer protection blocking products from Ukraine, chocolates, etc., blocking products from Belarus, notably milk. These are really trade wars they're using to pressure the Ukrainians to stay away from Western Europe and to join a commercial union with Russia.
Many Western nations have expressed concerns about Russia and its compliance or potential non-compliance with the Biological Weapons Convention. So how does that back and forth sort of play into this?
First of all, in terms of Syria, the Russians are strongly downplaying any involvement in the preparation of chemicals that the Syrians may have used. What we know is that during the Soviet phase in the late 1980s, the Soviets helped the Syrians create their chemical weapons armaments, munitions. Many of the chemicals are simply bought wholesale from the West, but the expertise is Soviet, and the design of the weapon systems is very much Soviet.
You know, another aspect of your report was talking about the upcoming Georgian election. What kind of role do we think we'll see a new president play in the trade relationship between Russia and Georgia?
Well, Alex, once again, the problems of the lab and the accusations against Georgia is really to put the Georgians on the defensive and to remind them who is their powerful big neighbor. And the message is, elect someone who will be nice to Russia and you'll have normal trade relations. If you elect another Misha Saakashvili, you may end up with a war on your hands, or at least a trade war and economic stagnation and backwardness.
And what do you expect we'll see transpire in the future? Despite this setback, will the trade relationship improve?
Alex, yes, I believe that this is simply a warning shot to Georgian public opinion. This is what we could do if, parallel, out of sight of the cameras, the Russians have sent inspection teams to check out Georgian farms and vegetable and food processing centers. So we really think that it's underfoot the restoration of the exports of fruits and vegetables north to Russia. And once again, Russia has a population about 20 times the size of Georgia. It's a huge market for Georgia and very important for Georgians.
And again, that was VOA correspondent and Moscow bureau chief Jim Brook. Moving on now to some good economic news out of Europe. After 18 months of recession, the Eurozone posted positive growth recently after unexpectedly strong consumer spending in its core economies.
But as VOA reporter Henry Ridgewell in London told On Assignment's Philip Alexio, analysts warned that while any good economic news in the Eurozone is welcome, this is not the end of the Euro crisis.
After 6 consecutive quarters of negative growth, the Eurozone is finally out of recession. The growth figure of 0.3% in the second quarter hardly signals a boom, but it is a milestone, says Darag Meher, foreign exchange strategist at HSBC in London.
The very fact that we can talk about growth, politicians can talk about growth, markets can talk about growth again, it's a significant psychological development.
Henry Ridgewell in London, this report that's sort of a mixed bag there.
That's right. It really is a patchy picture across Europe. Good news, but still bad news on the unemployment front. The growth was really coming from the big core economies of Europe, Germany and France. Yet still the peripheral countries in the south, countries like Spain and Italy, are still struggling. In fact, the economy in Spain shrank even further, 0.1%. The economy in Italy shrank by 0.2%. So that growth in the core economy is really masking the problems that still linger and seem very difficult to get rid of in those debt-ridden southern countries. And in Greece, ground zero of Europe's crisis, over the past 4 years, the economy shrank by 4.6%. That's a slight improvement on the previous 3 months, but indicative of the euro's ongoing problems, says Joe Rundle, head of trading at ETX Capital, a London-based financial services firm.
So you've got this two-tier Europe and Germany really controlling the austerity while it's booming. So I think it's certainly not the Eurozone problems being solved.
It takes a long time for economic growth to translate into jobs. So if you're an unemployed person in any of those peripheral economies, despite the fact that in your newspaper headline you might read that the economy is just about growing again, there's going to be little hope for several months yet that there's going to be a plethora of jobs turning up for you to apply for. That appears to be recognised in Brussels. Chantal Hughes is a spokeswoman for the European Commission.
This slightly more positive data is welcome, but there is no room for any complacency. Self-congratulatory statements suggesting that the crisis is over are definitely not for today.
And if it might be good news for politicians, as one analyst said in your report, that doesn't necessarily translate that they would get the support from the people. What are you hearing?
That's right. It's difficult to judge how this economic data might input on elections. Of course, we've got the German election coming up very soon, where Chancellor Angela Merkel is ahead in the polls. But across the whole continent, there's a feeling that the austerity measures simply went too far, especially among those, of course, who are struggling for a job. We've seen hundreds of thousands of public sector jobs cut across the continent. So that contributing to the many thousands of jobless people. The jobless figure in Spain, for example, just over a quarter of people unemployed. In Italy, 40% of young people don't have a job. So for young graduates emerging, for school leavers, it's just still a very, very difficult picture. For everybody who's facing those sorts of problems, pay cuts, joblessness, there are few options really. Either take to the streets, protest, try and do something through the ballot box, or emigrate and try and find a job elsewhere. But of course, you've got another big cohort of the population who approve of the policies, who are fearful of building up government debt, who think we do need the austerity policies, who've managed to keep their jobs, maybe even prosper in the economic downturn. And I guess that's the nature of a democracy. You have the haves, the have-nots, the ones who have jobs, those who don't. And that's why we've seen such a volatile political scene across Europe over the past few years. So very much turmoil in Europe, and I don't think these latest growth figures, as welcome as they are going to turn down the heat much in that sense.
All right, and our thanks again to reporter Henry Ridgewell in London. Now, Imran, the results of a recent survey are not too great for Europe either, with employers there saying they are less likely to hire in the last quarter of 2013 than they were earlier in the year.
We're taking a break now. On the other side, we talk Olympics with VOA Sports blogger Sunny Young. You're watching On Assignment.
Border Crossings is on the air from VOA Music Mix.
When I come in the morning, I'll go to my computer and I'll check our email to see what requests have come in over the night. This is how we start the show. This one is from Rwanda. His request is for If I Had You by Adam Lambert.
I'm looking up Adam Lambert News. Adam Lambert by request for Kumator Abo, who is joining us in Rwanda.
This will be cut 12 in CD1.
Cut 12.
My role is director of Border Crossings, so I make sure everything flows in the studio as the show is happening live.
We might have to add a Beatles tune at the end. We're just a little bit short.
Okay, perfect.
I don't even know what's on the show until Larry brings the bucket, like tomorrow's. He'll bring today's and place it in front of me. It's totally an unscripted show.
This is Border Crossings. I'm in the process of getting the songs ready that I'm going to be playing on today's show. You've held your breath, and now you can exhale. It is a party town, and if you've ever been to Party Town, I'm Larry London on Border Crossings.
Good morning, Border Crossings. What is your name, sir?
I take phone requests. I go to the studio every day.
Wolfer?
I get calls from everywhere, from China, just, you know, all over.
Lee's great to work with. He's got experience in broadcasting as a DJ, used to host his own radio show.
I've put together some language service IDs where I've used the resources of VOA to go around to the different language services, and they make great segues between songs.
Слушате емисiju Border Crossings uživo.
London and Border Crossings will return tomorrow right here on the Voice of America. Have a great day, and I'll see you in 23 hours.
Some notable recent developments for the Olympics. A former Olympic champion is elected president of the International Olympic Committee. Japan snags a future Olympics, and an ancient sport wrestled its way back into the lineup. And of course, to talk about all of this is joining me now, as usual, Sunny Young. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Imran.
Tell me something, Sunny. The sport was there for the previous Olympics, and now they plan to take it out. What's going on? They're confused about it?
About 7 months ago, Imran, the International Olympic Committee decided to drop wrestling from the program of the 2020 Games. They weren't happy with the leadership of international wrestling, and after an intense lobbying effort by wrestling officials, they were able to get back in the Games. There will be no break. We'll see wrestling in 2016 in Rio de Janeiro, as well as the 2020 Games.
Okay, but what about the countries who might be affected by this, positive or negative? How would that come into play?
Many countries have national wrestling teams. The sport is very popular in Europe. Here in the United States, we have a very, very strong wrestling program. And I think overall, most countries are very pleased that it will remain in the Games.
Okay, another interesting thing happening is the election of the new IOC president, German Thomas Bach, a former fencer at the Games in 1976. What does his election mean for the Olympics overall?
Thomas Bach is 59 years old. He ran on a platform of more diversity in the Olympic movement. You mentioned his athletic background. I think that was a positive. General reaction has been very positive to his election. He succeeds Jacques Roga, a Belgian doctor, and he was in power for about 12 years. We'll see whether Bach remains that long.
Does it help to be a former athlete to be playing such a major role in the team?
I think it helped his campaign to be the new IOC president. He has an understanding of sports and competition.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the process, the electoral process. How do they select or elect these officials?
The International Olympic Committee has 104 voting members. They have to receive a majority vote to win election. Historically, the presidential election process has been dominated by Europeans, Bach being a German. In fact, if we look at the history books, the only non-European was an American by the name of Avery Brundage. He was president of the IOC, I think, during the 1970s. But Europeans have really dominated that position.
What about Asians?
No Asians. There have been no Asians as presidents of the IOC.
And then finally, of course, good news for Japan too. The IOC decided to award the 2020 Summer Games to Tokyo. The last time the city hosted the Olympics was in 1964. Was this decision kind of expected?
I'm not sure if it was expected. The two other candidate cities were Madrid in Spain, Istanbul,
Yeah.
and all three cities had some negatives attached to their bid. With Tokyo, it was concern over fallout from the Fukushima nuclear plant.
Yeah.
And they were able to ease those concerns. And once again, Tokyo will be hosting the Olympics.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. VOA's Sunny Young talking about sports with On Assignment.
Thank you, Imran.
Thanks. We're taking a break now. On the other side, we join a VOA reporter at an inner city boxing gym helping young people develop their skills and their lives. You're watching On Assignment.
A nation of immigrants struggling to decide who belongs and who doesn't.
The promise we see in those who come here from every corner of the globe.
A debate shaped by politics.
You hear all this debate about infighting among conservatives.
An economy hungry for skilled workers. A president's pledge to secure the borders.
We're very uneasy when we see people on our lands.
Immigration, the new face of America.
When it comes to world headlines, you know there's more to the story. That's why we're On Assignment. Alex Villarreal, Imran Siddiqui, and powerhouse reporting from the angles no one else is telling, in the places no one else will go, getting the story behind the story.
On Assignment is next. Let's go.
On Assignment. Get more or become a broadcast partner by finding us on Facebook.
Washington, D.C. has seen its fair share of inner city problems throughout the years. Even now, nearly 1 in 5 Washingtonians live below the poverty line, and crime and violence are a constant presence in low-income neighborhoods. But there are encouraging signs.
Right in the middle of it all, one man is helping young people keep their lives on track by teaching them to box in his basement. Now, Arash Arabasadi of VOA's Persian News Network covered the story, and On Assignment's Doug Bernard joined him at the basement-turned-gym to talk about it. Let's check it out.
One time left, right. Two times now come out.
This is Limelight Boxing Gym. It's a nonprofit boxing gym, and the guy who runs it, his name's Tony Simmons. He is a Metro bus driver here in DC, and with his extra time and extra dollars in his pocket, he put together this gym. And they supply neighborhood kids everything from boxing gloves to shoes to entrance fees in competitions, and it's all just to keep kids off the street. Simmons has some basic ground rules. Boxers must keep a C average in school and can't get into fights outside the ring. But Simmons says it's more than teaching kids the sweet science of boxing today. It's giving them hope for tomorrow.
All the coaches down here work, and most of the time the kids emulate the grown-ups they're around. So we teach school, we teach working.
Because most of these students will have to go pro at something besides boxing.
And these kids gonna go out and get jobs and be law-abiding citizens.
So there's nothing going on right now, but on an evening time or when there's practice, what would actually be happening in this room?
They start in the afternoons when he's done with his shift driving the bus, and it's a couple dozen kids in here sweating. And I mean, when I was making this video, I was sweating how hard they were sweating. I mean, it was just, it's unbelievable. And this place doesn't have a whole lot of ventilation to begin with. We're kind of warm standing here. So if you can imagine 20 kids jumping up and down and doing push-ups and hitting bags. And
I can't, actually.
It's crazy. It's crazy, but it's such a cool thing to see.
All hail
Simmons says the few hours spent in the gym each day keep these kids off of the streets.
More than anything, by the time they leave out of the gym, they be so tired they just want to go home and do their homework and go to sleep.
What did Tony tell you about why he does this?
He says for him, it's all about giving back to the community. He grew up in D.C. and he had the good fortune of having both of his parents. And he says most of these kids don't. And in an instance where you don't have your whole family, he and the coaches, and it's his family who's helping him coach, they really kind of step in and they provide the added role of another family member. And he says that, it takes a village, and clearly this village is coming together.
So you're used to gyms, believe it or not. I used to be used to gyms. Look, they're smelly, they're uncomfortable, you spend most of your time in discomfort. So why do the kids come here? Why do they pack themselves in here and put themselves through it every week?
As far as I could see, and the one kid that I talked to was this kid Malik Jackson, who is now on the U.S. national boxing team. And that's no small feat. And in fact, Tony Simmons was recently invited to come be a coach for the U.S. national team. When you have a kid who, by all accounts, when he started was terrible. He lost 9-10 straight fights, but he stuck with it. And now he's become the elite of the elite. And so it's a motivating thing that these kids are like, hey, I know this kid. He's pretty good.
Right.
What if I could be pretty good too? What if this is something I can excel at?
But yeah, I get a lot of respect from the kids because I guess they look up to me and respect what I do. I've been putting in the work for 10 years and they see that.
Malik Jackson started boxing at Limelight when he was just 9 years old.
I used to get picked on a lot because of my size.
So he'd get into fights.
I kept getting suspended, so I needed to calm myself down and just came to the gym.
Back in my hometown, Detroit, there was the Kronk Gym. Again, it was in a basement. It was in the middle of nowhere on a nondescript street, and yet they produced some amazing fighters, like Tommy Hearns, just to name one.
Sure.
What is it about boxing gyms, do you think? I mean, do they have to be kind of gritty and dirty and nasty? What is that?
Yeah, I think it was, what was it? Was it maybe Rocky III, where he was having too much money and too much success? And when you get away from the basics, when you get away from the things that made you hungry, that made you want to excel. And I feel like a place like this, even when I was doing my martial arts back when I was younger, it was not at a fancy, results type gym. It was at some sweaty, dingy chalk and, disgusting, filthy mats. But you need that. You need that motivator that it's like, man, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to be in here the rest of my life. I want to go out there, and I can do that by putting in the work in here.
Arash Arabasadi always giving us interesting insights into American life, this time taking us inside the Limelight Gym here in Washington. Our thanks to Arash.
And now moving on, or should I say pedaling on, can bicycles help reduce poverty and protect the environment at the same time? One social entrepreneur in the Philippines says his line of high-end bicycles made of locally grown bamboo does just that.
From Manila, reporter Jason Struther tells us more about this company called Bam Bikes. So let us, pardon the pun, roll it.
Brian Benitez McClellan is passionate about bicycles. When the 29-year-old Filipino-American heads out onto the streets of Makati City, he grabs his bike. But his is made of bamboo.
Bamboo is a pretty incredible material. In the plant kingdom, it grows really rapidly and absorbs tons of carbon dioxide. So from that perspective, it's a very renewable resource. And then in a performance level, it's got the characteristics of naturally vibration dampening pole structures, which really absorb the road chatter and road buzz and make for a super smooth ride.
In 2010, McClellan founded Bambike, a company that turns locally sourced bamboo into bike frames. The Bambike workshop is located in the countryside, in the town of Victoria, 130 kilometers from Metro Manila. Out here, the bamboo is harvested from farms and the wild. Bambike's workers cut, treat, and process the material into specialized bike frames. The finished products are not cheap. They start at around $1,200, but McClellan says much of the profit goes back into this poor community.
where we can produce world-class certified bamboo bicycles for the global market while keeping jobs at home here in the rural provincial areas so that the workers can stay with their families and have gainful employment.
Many of the municipality's 60,000 inhabitants work in rice farming, but that is not a year-round job. McClellan and Victoria's mayor, Candido Guillaume, see the mutual benefits of working together. Already, some of Victoria's farmers are planting bamboo propagules, or seedlings.
We pay them 15 pesos, and that's good enough for them. And the good thing is, after producing the propagules, we bring them back this bamboo and plant it in their own backyard. So in the near future, for 3 years, hopefully, they can cut it up and make money out of it.
Brian Benitez McClellan visits one of the bamboo nurseries the town supports. He says in just a couple years, this plant will be strong enough to be harvested.
Bamboo is arguably the greenest building material on Earth. Bamboo is as strong as steel if you use the right species. It's very durable, really strong, and can stand up to the demands needed by a bicycle frame.
McClellan says bamboo can be used to build a lot more than just bike frames. He hopes Bambike is just the start of a bamboo revolution in the Philippines. Jason Struther for VOA News, Victoria.
And with that, we wrap up another edition of On Assignment.
And you know what, Alex? I lived in the Philippines for about 10 years. I never saw this bike. Had I seen it, I'd be like riding on this every day.
You would have been on it, right?
Absolutely, I'd be on it.
Well, you got to get back there so you can try one out. And I would be interested in seeing these bikes come to DC.
Yeah, and maybe I can export them, start a business.
Hey, you
a
never know.
All right, next week on the show, we'll be talking with VOA reporters covering Syria, Kashmir, and the Korean Peninsula.
And don't forget, you can watch all our episodes at voanews.com, Facebook, and YouTube, and with accurate captions in the YouTube player window.
Thank you so much for watching. So long from all of us at On Assignment. Catch you next week.